A Japanese mother watches her 1-year-old fall down. He lands hard. He cries. He looks up at her, searching her face for a signal. She stays completely still. To most Western eyes, that moment looks like indifference. To her, it is one of the most deliberate and valuable things she can offer her child's developing mind. Here is what makes this worth paying attention to. Japan has maintained one of the highest average cognitive performance scores in the world, not as a recent trend, but consistently, across generations, across tens of millions of children. The explanation is not genetic advantage. It is not an elite school system. The real answer begins far earlier than school, in the kitchen, in the bath, in the daily texture of how a mother and child spend ordinary time together. In the next 6 minutes, I am going to walk you through 4 habits that researchers believe carry the most weight. And I'll be upfront with you. One of them I find genuinely difficult to practice myself. We'll save that one for last. One thing before we begin. Some of what follows will feel counterintuitive from a Western parenting perspective. I'm not suggesting you adopt any of this wholesale. I'm showing you what the research actually says. What fits your family is your call. The 4th habit is built around a Japanese concept called skinship. The word doesn't have a direct English equivalent. It describes closeness that is expressed and maintained through physical contact. In Japanese households, mothers and babies bathe together as a nightly practice. Co-sleeping is common, often continuing until a child is 6 or 7 years old. Babies are carried directly against the body for the first 2 years, rather than transported in strollers at a distance. This tends to raise immediate concern for Western parents who have been told that this level of closeness creates dependency, that carrying a baby too much or sleeping alongside them produces children who cannot self-soothe or separate. The research does not support that conclusion. A study published in a leading developmental psychology journal found that infants who experienced consistent physical closeness through their first year showed measurable differences at a molecular level, specifically in the genes that govern stress response. The 3rd habit involves what Japanese babies eat and when. Weaning in Japan typically does not begin with bland rice cereal or smooth fruit purees. It begins with miso broth, soft fish, steamed vegetables, seaweed, tofu, genuinely flavored, genuinely textured food, introduced as early as 5 or 6 months. Japanese infants grow up with some of the highest dietary DHA intake in the world. DHA is an omega-3 fatty acid, and it is not a minor detail. The infant brain is roughly 60% fat, and a significant portion of that fat is DHA. Without adequate supply, the brain cannot construct itself properly. A long-running study out of the University of Bristol tracked thousands of children across years and found that higher seafood intake during pregnancy and early infancy was associated with meaningfully better verbal ability, fine motor development, and social functioning by age 8. A Japanese baby's first experience of food is complex, savory, slightly bitter layered. That is not a small thing. The relationship a person develops with food begins at the very first bite. The 2nd habit is perhaps the most accessible because it costs nothing and requires no preparation. In most Western homes, a particular speaking pattern tends to emerge around babies almost automatically. It becomes a kind of performance of smallness, as though the goal is to match the baby's level rather than draw them towards something higher. Japanese mothers tend to take a different approach. There is a practice sometimes called kateracake, which translates roughly as narrated caregiving. From the earliest days, Japanese mothers speak to their infants in complete, natural sentences. They describe what they are doing. They comment on the weather. They narrate the process of making dinner. To an outside observer, it can look peculiar, a flowing one-sided conversation with someone who cannot yet respond. But inside that baby's brain, it is anything but one-sided. One of the most influential studies in child development found that the sheer volume of words a child hears before the age of 3 is among the strongest predictors of their academic trajectory years later. Researchers discovered that by kindergarten, some children had heard tens of millions more words than others, and that gap tracked directly with later performance. The 1st habit, the one I warned you about, is the one I find most difficult to put into practice myself. Japanese children are given genuine responsibility long before most Western parents would consider it appropriate. In Japan, there is a well-known television program that has aired on national television since 1991. It follows very young children, some only 2.5 years old, as they navigate real city streets alone to complete a small errand for their family. Real traffic, real shops, real independence. For Western audiences seeing it for the first time, the reaction is almost universally shock. For Japanese families, it is simply a familiar tradition made visible. But the television program is really just a reflection of something deeper. From the time a Japanese child can walk steadily, they're expected to do real things. Pour their own water. Carry items. Put their shoes away. Prepare small parts of a meal. These are not token gestures, they are genuine contributions, treated as such. In Western parenting, the typical instinct is to delay. He is only 2, let me do that for him. The Japanese instinct is inverted. He is already 2, of course he can contribute. 3 and 4. This is the habit I struggle with most. The urge to step in, to smooth it over, to just do it myself in 5 seconds rather than watching a small child work through something slowly and imperfectly, that urge is powerful. But that discomfort, that slow struggle, that is the brain being constructed. Stepping back is not doing nothing. It is doing something very specific and very intentional. Here is the truth that sits underneath all 4 of these habits. The children who develop the strongest minds are not the ones who are most intensively trained. They are the ones who are most genuinely trusted. Held close. Fed real food. Spoken to as though their understanding is already forming. Given the dignity of doing things on their own terms. This is not a method that requires a purchase or a program. It is a way of seeing your child as a person already in the process of becoming capable, already worthy of being taken seriously. And every single one of these habits can begin tonight, with nothing more than a decision to start. If one of these stopped you, made you think, made you uncomfortable, made you want to try something, I'd be glad to hear which one. See you in the next video.